If you're into self-hosting or just looking for more control over your personal data, Immich is a project you should probably know about. It's a free and open source photo and video management app that runs on your own servers and gives you a fast and modern interface without relying on the cloud. You get automatic uploads from your phone, timeline browsing, facial recognition, reverse geocoding, album sharing, smart search, and full access to your EXIF data. And in this video, we're going to take it a step further by enabling GPU acceleration to make tasks like facial recognition and video processing even faster and more efficient. But if you don't have a GPU, that's totally fine. Immich runs great on a CPU too, and you'll still get all of the core features. We'll go step by step through setting it up with Docker Compose with a clean.env configuration file, optional Traefik labels, GPU acceleration, and support for mounting external folders if your photo library lives on a NAS or a network share. By the end, you'll have a private, high-performance photo album platform that's easy to manage, secure, and completely under your control. So we've got a lot to cover today, so let's get started. We're going to need a couple of things to run Immich. The first thing is a server. Now, I'm going to run this on Ubuntu server. This will work on any flavor of Linux. So feel free to choose your favorite flavor, but I'm going to run Ubuntu. Then you'll want to SSH into that server. I've SSH'd into mine, and make note of your IP address. Mine is 192.168.10.111. Next, you'll want to make sure that Docker is installed. You could do that simply by running docker-v and should show a version. That means Docker is installed and you're good to go. So next up, if you're using a video card, you want to make sure that your system recognizes the video card and that your drivers are installed for the video card. So I'm running lspci to see all of the devices that are connected to my machine. And in here, I should see something like NVIDIA video card. So if we scroll all the way down to this first device, you can see NVIDIA Corporation GA102, and you can see my RTX 3090. So the device is getting recognized by the system, but you do not need an RTX 3090 or anything close to get GPU acceleration for Immich. You can actually use some pretty old cards. If we look at the supported backends for Immich, it says for CUDA for NVIDIA GPUs, it supports all the way back to 5.2 or higher. So if we go to their device list and look for 5.2, it's actually in the legacy CUDA. And you can see 5.2 is a Tesla M60. It's all of these Quadros and actually going back to a GeForce 910. So if you have anything higher than a GeForce 9 series or 9 series included, you're good to go. So don't worry, you don't need the latest and greatest GPU for this. You can use an old GPU. And again, if you don't have a GPU, you can use the CPU and it will work just fine. This just makes it a little bit faster and a little bit more efficient. To install our video card drivers, we're going to follow Ubuntu's documentation, and I will have all of my documentation in a link below. So if you're looking for commands, you can copy and paste. You'll find them in my documentation and you can find that below. So what we're going to do first is run Ubuntu drivers devices, and this will list all of the drivers that are available for our devices. And in here, we can see that we have this one right here that's NVIDIA driver 570 distro non-free recommended. So this is the one I want to install because this is the one that's being recommended. So let's install that specific version. So what I'm going to run then is sudo apt install NVIDIA drivers -570-yes. And that should install the driver. If you want a quick shortcut, you could have just run sudo ubuntu drivers install, and that will install the recommended one that we just saw. Okay, so after we install it, we need to reboot it. That's pretty important. After rebooting, you'll SSH back in, and then we'll want to run NVIDIA-SMI. And this is just a little utility to check our NVIDIA process. If we had something running that was using the process, we would see it listed here. But the fact that it shows our card means that our card is installed and that the driver is installed. So this is a good sign. Next, we'll need to install the NVIDIA Container Toolkit. Now, what is that? This is a toolkit that allows your NVIDIA video card, so the physical GPU, to actually communicate with Docker containers. And so this is, I don't want to say a shim, but kind of middleware that connects your driver and your hardware video card to containers so that containers can then access that GPU. So it's pretty easy to install. Looks complicated, but it's just running a couple of commands. So let's run these. So first is a curl. Looks like adding a GPG key. We don't want to use experimental packages. We just want to use normal packages. Then let's update our repositories to get the latest packages. Then we'll install the container toolkit. Once that's installed, we should be good. Then after that, we need to configure Docker to tell Docker to start with support for the toolkit. So let's run this right here. Then we need to restart Docker itself. Now we should be good, but how do we know that it's actually working? Well, what we want to do is test to make sure we can access the GPU within a container. Earlier, we ran NVIDIA SMI to test it at the host level, but now if we run the container NVIDIA SMI, it should show the same thing. So if we want to now test our toolkit to make sure it's working with Docker and that could communicate with our driver, we'll want to run NVIDIA SMI, that utility we ran earlier, but instead of running it on the host, we're now going to run it inside of the container. And so if that works, that proves that Docker itself can communicate with our video card. So I'm going to run this, which is Docker run, remove any existing. The runtime is NVIDIA, use all GPUs, and use Ubuntu for the image and run NVIDIA SMI. There we go. It's seeing the same thing that we saw with the NVIDIA SMI command, but it actually ran it inside of the NVIDIA SMI container. So that proves now that Docker can communicate with our video card. So pretty awesome. So now that we have the container toolkit installed and Docker installed and it can communicate with our GPU, let's now create a folder on our server so that it can house our compose file as well as some of our configuration files. So I typically make mine in /opt, and then I create a folder called stacks. And then within there, I create a folder per stack. Now this image stack is going to be called image. So what I'm going to do is a sudo mkdir-p, which is going to make that whole entire path or that whole entire tree and create the folder for us. Then if we do an ls opt stacks, we can see our image folder. Now the next thing that I do is change the permissions on that stacks folder so that I can do anything that I need to do as me myself without typing sudo every time. So what I do is a sudo chown. Chown is change ownership. And then I'm saying the group server admin, that's me who I'm logged in as now, and the user server admin. And then I say recursively from opt stacks all the way down. So that will include image. So let's cd into that folder now, into image, and do an ls. We could see we don't have anything in here. So let's actually create our compose file so that we can start spinning up image. So I personally use nano, so I'm going to do a nanocompose.yaml. And then in here, I'm going to paste my Docker Compose contents. So what goes inside of that Docker Compose? Well, a lot of stuff for image. So let's check out my compose file. So this is the compose file that I'm going to use. It's an entire stack for image. And I say an entire stack because image uses a couple of services. So first we have our image server, which contains the image server itself. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Then we have image machine learning, which is used for facial recognition and I think object detection and stuff like that. So that's another service within our stack. Then we have Redis in this stack as well. And Redis is a big in-memory database. It's a key value store. A lot of people use it for caching things because it's super fast, because it's all in RAM. But I think they're using it as a queue, which I think is pretty cool. I'll have to try that in the future. To queue up all of their events to do work across all of these services. Say, for instance, you took a new image and there's a new task to recognize someone's face. I think those tasks get scheduled in there, and then the image machine learning will pick up that task and do it. At least that's how I think their queue works. I need to do some more with Redis queue because it sounds pretty cool. Usually use Kafka, so Redis queue sounds pretty awesome. I'll check that out. Then we have database, and the database, I think it could be any number of backends, but they're using Postgres. I'm a huge fan of Postgres too. So this is our Postgres stack. I'll dive into it a little bit deeper. But this is why I was saying that this stack runs quite a few services, because it's not just image itself. It's all of these services together that make up the image service. So let's dive into the image server first. This is Immich Server. We're naming it Immich Server, and we're going to pull down image version. Well, how do we know what the image version is? Well, we're also going to create a .env that we'll do here in a little bit. And within this .env, we can store some of our configuration and kind of clean up our compose file, so we're not littering our compose file with configuration itself. Long story short, we're going to use this variable right here, image version, which we're saying is release. And it's going to be plugged into here, written into there when this gets instantiated. So really, it's going to pull the release. And then you might say, well, what the heck is this? :-release? Well, that means if we don't define it, it's going to default to release. You want to use release, but this is kind of a fail-safe so that if you don't include it, it's going to fall back to that. So let's hop down to volumes really quick. So volumes is where we're going to specify our upload location. So with Immich, we're going to upload images to it. We need to know where that location is. So on the left side, so with inner container, it's a variable called upload location. We go into our .env. That upload location is just in ./library. So it's going to create that folder for us. So what does that mean? Well, that means when we start the container, it's going to auto create a folder in the current working folder and then name it library, use the folder called library. So for us, that means it would be right here in Immich. It will create a folder called library, and that's where uploads will go. They don't have to go there. And that is why we have this environment variable so that you can define where they go. Next is something I forgot to add, so I just plugged it in really quick. But we're mounting a folder called photos. And we're mounting that inside of the container to a read-only path called photos. Now, why are we doing that? Well, you might not want to upload files to your photo location. So what am I talking about? Well, so by default, Immich wants to maintain your library because it's a photo platform, right? And so as it backs up say your photos from your devices, it's going to place them inside of this upload location. But what if you have photos that you've had since before you had a phone, or photos you take with a nice DSLR camera or anything else? If you have a photo library outside of Immich, you can include those too. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to mount an SMB share, so a Windows share or Samba share, to the host machine at /mnt/photos, and then mount that inside of the container on /mnt/photos and make it read-only. So what that lets me do is bring in external photos that are outside of Immich. And I have an SMB share that has some of those photos that we'll see. Sounds a little bit confusing, but we'll take care of all of that here in a little bit. It's going to be a pretty full-featured tutorial. Next is the time zone. And really what this is just saying is, hey, map our host time zone to the container's time zone so that if you look at logs or you exec inside of the container, times match, and you don't have to do date-time math because that is hard. Next, we're saying to use an env file, and we have that env file up here. Next, we're exposing some ports. These are the default ports, so inside, outside, 2283. And then we're saying, hey, this depends on Redis and database, and so those are our other services. We're saying, don't start this service until both Redis and database are started. So pretty cool. There's no sense of starting this service if it depends on these two other services in our stack. So we're not going to start this until those are both started and the health checks respond healthy. And so we're going to say, hey, restart always. You can say restart unless stopped, which I typically do. But sometimes I forget to start things back up and I reboot it. So lately I've been saying always, mainly because sometimes I'll start a service, I'll forget, and I'll think, yeah, if I just reboot it, the service will come back up. Well, no, if you manually stop one and then you reboot the system, it doesn't come back up because you said restart unless stopped. So anyways, I'm starting to use always a little bit more just because memory. So health checks, we're making sure that Docker health checks are on because Immich supports health checks. So it's going to run a health check on this system. Immich supports them. Immich will respond with, hey, I'm healthy. If it doesn't, it's just going to bounce this container and try to start it back up. So we want those on for sure. And then let's hop over Immich machine learning. We'll go to Redis because this one's a little more obvious right now. So this is what we talked about a little bit earlier. We're going to name it Redis. We're going to use Valkey, a specific version of Valkey, which is Redis, really a bookworm version. And then we're also going to run health checks on this. And this health check, we're defining it. The test is going to say Redis CLI ping. And so the Redis CLI ping, I think, is basically not really a ping in the traditional sense, but it's Redis's way of communicating with the Redis server to say, hey, are you alive? And it will respond with, yes, I'm alive. So what this is saying is run this test, the CLI ping. If it returns, fine, we're good. If it doesn't return back successfully, or if this side isn't true, we're going to exit one. And so that will exit the container, and one, I think, will be the exit code on here. Not important. What is important is that the health checks will run. And if it's not healthy, it will restart the service. And restart always is on here too. Database, now I mentioned this earlier. We're going to name it Immich Postgres. It's going to use a version of Postgres from Immich app. Then we're going to define some environment variables. We're saying the Postgres password is in our .env of db password. The Postgres user, again, in our .env. Postgres DB, the database name. Postgres init db args, data checksums. So what this is saying is like, hey, when you start up, run data checksums and run them throughout so that we can detect any kind of corruption and basically do checksums on the data all the time, every time I think we read and write. Anyways, you want this on so that it can verify the integrity of your database. DB storage type. So this is an optimization that you can set for SSDs. You basically want it to be SSD unless you're running this on hard drives. If you're running this on hard drives or traditional spinning disks, you'll want to set HDD. And where do you do that? Hey, in our .env. You want to do, I think, HDD here. And I think what that's going to do is not run as many parallel tasks. And it basically kind of slows things down, not in the traditional sense, but it's optimized, I guess, for hard drives rather than SSDs, which have a lot more I/O. And so this DB storage type is going to be SSD for most folks. But if you're running it on spinning disks, totally fine. It's not really going to slow you down. It's just going to optimize Postgres for hard drives rather than SSDs. Next is Immich Machine Learning, and this is the container for machine learning. So it's the thing doing the object detection and facial recognition. So this is yet another service in our stack. And if we look at this, it's pretty straightforward. It's going to use the same Immich version that we're using. And I have mine set to CUDA, and it's actually going to extend it's going to extend, which I'm personally going to turn on, this file that we have and we'll create too, which is the hardware acceleration ML YAML file. So then if we look at our hardware acceleration.ml file, you can see that in here, I'm specifying CUDA and I'm specifying my driver as NVIDIA, and I'm specifying, hey, what are the capabilities we want to use? And I only want to use the GPU. So that's all we need for the hardware acceleration.ml YAML file. As I mentioned earlier, we can use other backends for machine learning, or we can use the CPU if we don't have an NVIDIA video card. But I'm going to set mine to CUDA here and reference this file, the hardware acceleration ml.yaml. And again, you can comment this out, remove CUDA from here, and it will just use the CPU version if you want. But because I have a video card that's NVIDIA, I'm going to use the CUDA version. I'll link documentation just in case you want to switch this around depending on AMD, Intel, or NVIDIA. We're going to keep going with NVIDIA. So anyways, the model cache, this is where it caches those models so it doesn't have to download these models every time, maybe self-explanatory. The .env file, it's just referencing this same .env file that we have right here. And then if we hop back to the Immich server, if we go into its extends and we uncomment that, you'll see that I'm going to extend this hardware acceleration.transcoding.yaml file, and I'm going to say that my service, my transcoding backend, is what I specify or default to CPU. So if we look at the hardware acceleration transcoding file, you can see here I'm using this service, NVANC, that's our encoder, and I want to use the driver, NVIDIA, saying 1 GPU, and then which capabilities do I want to use of the GPU? Well, I want to use GPU, compute, and video. And so what this will do is use my NVIDIA video card for any kind of transcoding that we need to do. Worth mentioning, if you want to run your own Postgres database outside of this stack, you totally can, and there's environment variables that will let you do that. And the same goes for Redis too. So if you're already running Postgres in your environment, say you have a shared database server, you can totally do that. And I'll link to where the environment variables are that you can configure that. Because I have my own Postgres server, and in the future, I might end up putting it on my shared Postgres server. Same with Redis. I did mention optional Traefik labels. I just put those in here. So if you're running Traefik, they'll be here for you to use. And Traefik is a reverse proxy. It also helps you get secure certificates. So if you're using that, that'll be here. And so I need to add the .env files so that you can plug those in. So inside of the .env, I just added this, a section now for Traefik. And we can define the router name, the Traefik domain name, and then a cert resolver. So if you're using Traefik, it's there. If not, don't even worry about that section. And honestly, you could delete those commented out labels if you're not using it. Okay, let's go back to our server now. I did have Nano open, but I realized I was using YAML instead of YML. Either are fine, but I want to be consistent with my documentation. So let's do compose.yml. What's going to go inside of here? All of that stuff we just talked about. So all of this stuff is going to be inside of here. Let me save that and close it. Next, let's create our hardware acceleration file. So this is going to be a nano HW AXL.yml. In there goes our hardware acceleration machine learning file. Let's save that and exit out of here. Next is our transcoding file. Let's create that. And let's paste in those values here. Next is our .env file. So let's create our .env file. I think that's the last thing we need to add, and I'm going to paste this in here. Now, worth mentioning, you should probably have a different password than Postgres. You should probably have a different username than Postgres, and you can use the database name of Immich, and you should be good. Just use a different username and password than that. It's not good at all. So anyways, we're going to save this in here. Let's close out of here. Before we start this, kind of glad I caught this, I did mention that we want to mount an external library. So I want to mount a share that's on my TrueNAS server here on my network called Photos, and then I want to mount that so that Immich can see them. So what we want to do is mount it to the host system, and then from Docker, we want to map the host into the container. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to connect to an SMB share, and then we need to mount that SMB share to mnt/photos so that this Docker container can use it. So in order to mount this share, we need a couple of pieces of information. First, my TrueNAS server is 192.168.10.10. Then I created the SMB share. It's called Photos. Then I created a username called Photos User. And then I created a Haxor password called Photos User with an exclamation point. And then what we want to do is mount that to this machine to /mnt/photos. So first I want to ping my server to make sure it's up and I can communicate with it from where this Docker container is running. Then what I want to do is create a credentials file for this. So we're not just putting the credentials anywhere. We're creating a specific file for our credentials for the SMB share. Then in here, I'm going to put our username equals Photos User, password equals Photos User. Password. Let's save this. We don't have that directory. Let's create that directory real quick. So let's create that directory really quick. Created that directory. Now let's create our credentials file. Paste this in here, save it. Then we want to secure it with 600. This means that only root can read and write to it, which if we want to check, we can do this. And you can see right here, only root and the group root, and only they can read and write. Now that we have that, let's modify our FS tab or our file system so that we can mount this share automatically when we boot. So let's go all the way down to the end, and I'm going to paste this line, and this is, I'm just going to call this SMB share for Immich. And what are we doing? So we're saying, hey, this is our server, 192.168.10.10. That's my TrueNAS server. This is the SMB share called Photos. Where do we want to put that? We want to put this to /mount/photos. It's CIFS, so SMB. And then our credentials, instead of putting our credentials in here, this is why we created a credential file. We're saying go out to here and get it read-only. And that's because Immich recommends to do read-only, because I don't think Immich can actually delete the actual file. So anyways, Immich says to mount SMB shares or mount any kind of external files or folders as read-only. So let's save this, close out. And now let's not do anything fancy. Let's just reboot it and make sure it's there when it comes up. If you're having an issue mounting this with fstab, be sure you have the CIFS utils installed. It might say permission denied when you try to mount this, but it's because you don't have the CIFS utils. Took me a while to figure that out because I thought I had this installed on that machine. So that's a requirement, I guess, if you want to do a mount from an SMB share. Now let's go into ops stacks into Immich, and we can see all of our files here. Now let's start this stack up. To start our Docker stack, we're going to run docker compose up-d, and this will pull down all of the images and then start our stack. Okay, so we can see we have our network, our volumes, and then all of our containers. Let's do a docker ps to make sure everything's doing okay. And we can see health is still starting, health is still starting. Still starting. Okay, and if we run it again, we can see all of them are now healthy. So let's go check out Immich. If we go to the IP address of our Docker server, in my case, it's 192.168.10.111. And then on the port of 2283, we can see Immich is running. Pretty awesome. So let's do getting started. So the first user you set up is the admin user, and that's going to be me. So let me set this up. Okay, and let's do sign up. Now we should be able to sign in. Awesome, signed in, welcome. Let's get going, let's set our theme. Obviously, we're not gonna pick light, we're gonna pick dark. Set up our privacy. Here it's letting us know that the map feature relies on a tile service that comes from immich.cloud. We can choose whether or not we want to allow that. And then version check whether or not we want to allow that. So I'm going to choose yes for both because I want to use the maps and I wanted to check for new versions. So storage template is pretty important. It's how files and folders and your libraries are laid out on disk. There are some templates and there are some implications for all of this. You'll want to read through this and see what you want to set. I'm actually not going to set it at all, mainly because it says right here, when enabled, this feature will auto-organize files based on user-defined templates. Due to stability issues, the feature has been turned off by default. So if they've turned it off, I'm just not even going to bother and just say, I don't want to define the template for the files and how they're laid out on disk. It's fine with me. So here we are inside of Photos. It's pretty blank right now. Now, we don't see anything because we haven't synchronized any of our photos to Immich, and we haven't enabled any external libraries. Although we did mount them with Docker, we didn't enable them yet with Immich. So let's do that really quick. So what we'll do is we'll go into administration, and then we'll go into external libraries. And then we'll add an external library. It's asking us who's the owner. It's going to be me. I'm the only person here. But it says it can't be changed later. I'm the only owner, so it's totally fine. And then next is the path to here. Now, this is technically the path within the container, right? So let's look at our Docker Compose file and see what the path is within the container. So if you remember, we mounted it to MNT photos. So on the outside, it's MNT photos. On the inside, it's MNT photos. So we should be able to just paste this right here, and it should be able to mount it. Paste that, add that, validate. They all look okay. Okay, save. So once we have that added, now let's scan that library. And you could do that by scan all libraries. Hopefully this finds some photos. And that was fast. It found photos. So it found 460 photos, about 2 gigabytes, and 4 videos. So let's go back to Immich. And now let's look at our photos. Awesome. So now it's showing this timeline or this panel of all of these photos that I added. So pretty cool. A lot of older photos that I added. So this is my timeline. You could see they're according to date. So here's some from Arizona. This is Banff and Lake Louise, like one of my favorite places in the whole world. Pretty awesome. And I mentioned earlier that we can see the EXIF data. So if we go into the information box, we can see the EXIF data. And so here you can see it was taken with my Sony 5100. The aperture was f8. Shutter speed was 1/80th, 16 millimeter, ISO 100. on my 16 to 50 millimeter lens. So pretty cool, pretty cool. And I can add a location here. I can pick a location. This is technically Lake Louise. And I'm not seeing it here. Well, I kind of know where it is. It's roughly. Well, I don't know why it's not able to search. It seems like it's just US locations, which is kind of weird. You would think that this would, no, Tokyo's here. Can I just put Banff then? Even though that's technically not Banff. Yeah, Banff, Alberta, Canada, sure. Close enough. Not really, but okay. Cool. So let's go back to all of my photos. You can see some photos, me, my wife. So I uploaded a lot of photos here. Pretty cool that they're all here. I kind of expected them to be. But now I can create an album to kind of organize these photos. So if I wanted to create one called Banff, or let's just say Canada in general, I can, and I can say Canada. Then I can select only the photos that were from Canada. So, you know, I pick these, this, sure, some of these. And then I can say done, or the other trips to Canada that I should have here in here too. That's Hawaii, pretty far from it. Like this right here is from Algonquin. This is Toronto. That's Toronto. That's Toronto. That's Minneapolis. So yeah, if I wanted to create an album and I say done, now I have this album called Canada. Pretty cool, huh? And now it's also starting to recognize people. This is pretty funny. Wow, that's that is me. But I don't know what's going on in that photo. But let's say this is Tim, and it has 33 assets. So it's already recognized me throughout these photos, which it did pretty good. It did pretty good. This is when I saw Mount Fuji. Just woke up early in the morning, saw Mount Fuji. Me and my brother in Japan, my family, Japan fishing. So pretty cool. So it recognized this. Recognize my face. So that means the facial recognition is working here. It sees my grandma. It does recognize my grandmother in all of these. So pretty cool. So facial recognition is working. It actually ran through all of my photos really fast and did facial recognition on all of those really fast. I'm pretty impressed at how fast that went. I mean, you know, I only had 2 gigs of photos, only a couple hundred. So I kind of expected it to be fast. And it's pretty awesome. It didn't try to recognize this artwork right here for photos, but statues it did. So I don't know how it determined that. Oh, and okay, so this is artwork. It did recognize artwork within here for a face, but these are all normal things. Like it'll pick these up, but pretty cool. I can add names. Yeah, Seiji, Yukio. Anyways, so we know facial recognition works. If you're curious about like, well, how do I rerun the scan in case I need to? You wouldn't really, and it should just work, but you might. So you would kind of go into jobs, and then you would go into face detection, and you would just say refresh. And so that would refresh the whole entire thing. Missing, this would just queue up all the ones that were added and just process those. And then reset face detection on all of those. And that's a good point. This is technically face detection, which says, hey, I can detect a face. Then there's facial recognition, which says, okay, this face belongs to this person, or these 2 faces are the same person. So, and you can see you have settings for all of these jobs. If you wanted to trigger them or reset them or do them again, you can definitely do it here. And over here, you can see the timeline. I know I mentioned this was a timeline, but you can actually see the timeline over here and actually go back in time. And so, yeah, I must have had dates on these photos, and it's finding them. Pretty cool. I should add more metadata to all of my photos, but it's working really well. I don't have GPS cords on most of these because I was using an older DSLR. So at some point, it would be nice for me to just go back and kind of do a batch edit and add those GPS cords to some of this so that, you know, I could see the push pins on the map, or I could sort by location. So And if I hover over these, you could see that these are videos and they're actually playing. So these must have been transcoded, and I'm seeing some weird kind of shifting pixelation. These might have been HDR, and I didn't turn HDR on to do the tone mapping. And I kind of think that's what's going on. I didn't think I was going to upload an HDR video, but I guess I did. So you can fix that. You can do that in the settings in the compose file to say that, hey, you do want to do the tone mapping for HDR. I didn't think I had any HDR videos. I guess I do. And the same goes for these videos too. Of course, the 4 that I picked were actually shot in HDR and they don't have the HDR tone mapping going. So anyways, that's pretty easy to fix. Another cool thing is you kind of have this universal search bar. So if I want to search for flowers, if it maybe recognized flowers, hey, it recognized flowers. If I want to search for water, I guess I could. I could. If I wanted to search for Tim specifically and search for me and see some of these old photos of me, and that's obviously not me. But, you know, you could. I don't know why it's saying I'm in some of these photos, or maybe it just doesn't know what a Tim is. But if I wanted to say a duck, I do see a duck there. Bird, duck, water, koi. I'm not sure how it's getting duck out of some of these. But if I wanted to search Hawaii, you know, one of the places that I had listed, I could and see Hawaii. Not all of these are Hawaii. Would be awesome if I could see the metadata here too. And maybe that's an advanced feature that I'm not seeing, but it would be cool to see the metadata for this, specifically the machine learning stuff, so that I could see exactly why it thinks that this is Hawaii. Like actually, this is Hawaii. This one is Hawaii, so that was a bad one. But this is not Hawaii. This is Mexico. So, you know, it would be awesome for me, even if it's like some developer feature to turn on to say, you know, hey, what metadata do you see for this? And maybe this is an option. I'm relatively new to Immich. Either way, pretty cool that it's recognizing some of this stuff. Like this is pretty advanced, and it's all self-hosted. You know, that's what kind of blows my mind. Another thing you could do from the web view is upload images directly to here. Say I wanted to upload this file right here, and I upload this file, and then I can pick the file. You could see this picture of the Jet KVM. So pretty cool. I can upload files from here. I can connect to external libraries. But another huge feature of Immich is installing the application on your mobile device and then backing up that mobile device to Immich. So you should be able to find Immich in the App Store that you're using, and I already have this installed. You'll notice that it's asking for a server endpoint URL. Now that's the DNS entry, or in my case, the IP address of my server. Now I'm only running Immich here internally, so it's over HTTP, but if I ever run this externally, I'm going to turn on TLS or SSL or HTTPS so that I secure communication between this device and the server. You'll want to do the same thing too if you ever decide to do that. Now, do you have to expose it publicly to use it? No. You can use this all on your local network. You can install a VPN client on your phone, VPN in, synchronize your stuff, and it will just work. But if you ever want a more seamless experience, you're probably going to have to expose it publicly so you can get background syncing and sharing and all of that good stuff. So anyways, I'm going to add the URL of my server here locally. Then it's going to ask for my username and password. Then we'll log in. Now I'm in. Now it's asking if Immich can have access to my photos. I had it on select photos, but I can select more photos. Then once I'm in, I can see my photos. So I can see Golden Gate Bridge. I can see things when I was in Japan, the CNE in Toronto when I was there, Arizona, Grand Canyon, all of that. When installing it and launching it for the first time, you should have been prompted to whether or not you want to allow access to all of your photos or select. I said select, but if I want to change it, I'll go into my settings and I'll say all. And I'm going to say you have full access to all of my photos. Sure, allow full access. It's me. Why not? And so if I go back to Immich, now I have full access to all of my photos. Well, why did I do that? Well, I may want to back them up to this machine. So let's do it really quick. I'm not backing up anything right now, but let's choose an album to back up. That's really cool about this too. You can select individual albums. I don't have to back everything up. So I can select an album. Which album do I want to choose? I think Panorama is probably the least risky. There's nothing risky in here. I just don't want to expose anyone. I mean, not expose anyone. I do it. I just privacy. Okay, privacy. Getting weird. So let me choose favorites, and I'll turn that on. And then I have the option to sync albums. So this is going to create and upload your photos and videos to the selected albums on Immich. So let's say sync photos. And so now I have 113 photos. It's going to synchronize to there. And that's my album called Favorites. So what I'm expecting is that it's going to create an album called Favorites and then synchronize those to there. So let's say go, synchronize. It is cruising. So if I go into albums, I can see, yes, it did create an album called Favorites. Kind of confusing because this was Favorites and I called this Favorites. But anyways, it's all the way done. And so 113 images in here. Yeah, it did synchronize them. Now, I know it showed some videos in here too. Is there a nice filter here for videos? I'm sure there is. I was kind of hoping I would just have a video because I want to kind of prove what I was thinking about HDR or not. Oh, so this is working okay. This one's working okay. Okay, so yeah, these videos are working okay. So my theory about the HDR ones flickering because I didn't have tone mapping turns on, I think is true. Because these weren't HDR and they seem to be fine. Nano, he was so fat then. Not anymore. So the Immich app is really powerful. And I think that's a huge reason why people choose Immich, is so that they can back up their phone's images to their own server. And then from there, run facial recognition or object detection or whatever they want on top of there. Or not do that. They might just want to have their images there stored centrally and not use a cloud service to do that. All that being said, if you are going to divorce yourself from the cloud, I think it's really important to mention backups. Now, Immich does have some guidance on backups. They talk about backing up your containers, your volumes, your database, and they even have some utilities to do it. Or you could just go the simple route, and if you're running this in a virtual machine, just take snapshots of that and then back that up somewhere. Backups are always important, but they're especially important when it comes to things you can't recreate, like photos and videos. So make sure your stuff is backed up. And I'll have a link in my documentation to the backup and restore documentation on Immich. It's really good to read through and follow and think about. Because if you're divorcing yourself from the cloud, you're also divorcing yourself from their availability and from their backup strategy and restore, which is pretty good in general. So now the onus is on you to do that. And if you don't want to totally pull all of your images out of the cloud, you could actually use Immich as a backup for the cloud, right? So you could back up all of your photos on your phone to Immich just in case your cloud service ever goes down, or if you switch devices and switch cloud services. So if you're an iOS user and you want to switch to Android, well, Immich is a good way to kind of bridge that and get those photos to the next place, and vice versa. We covered a ton today on Immich, and hopefully you get it up and running, and hopefully you see how awesome this application is. But before we go, I'm curious, are you planning to use Immich to fully replace something like iCloud or Google Photos? Or are you looking for something more specific, like a personal archive, a shared family library, or just peace of mind? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear how you're thinking about using Immich. I'm Tim. Thanks for watching.